My daughter told me she was keeping her birthday small this year, just a few friends. I believed her until I saw the party online. Everyone was there but me. Even the cake had a father-daughter topper. Just not this father. But what happened next was rather unexpected. My name's Alan. I'm a civil engineer, been one for almost 20 years. I build things to last. Foundations, frameworks, quiet structures that don't call attention to themselves but keep the world from falling apart. Funny thing is, I thought I'd done the same with my daughter. Built something solid, reliable. But buildings don't lie. People do. You ever get hit with something that doesn't scream, doesn't swing, doesn't shout, but just quietly replaces you? That's what this felt like. Not a fight. Not even a break. Just a party I wasn't at. She told me she wanted to keep it small this year, super low-key, Dad. Just a few friends. I nodded, relieved. We were still figuring things out. The divorce had stabilized into something civil, predictable. I still picked her up every other weekend, helped with school projects, did the quiet, invisible things that don't make Instagram but keep a kid's world steady. We'd sat in the living room a week before her birthday, her legs curled under her on the couch, picking out string lights on her phone. She told me, I don't want drama this year. Just chill vibes. I believed her. Of course I did. Her actual birthday fell on a Wednesday. She was at her mother's that week, and I sent her a text that morning, short and simple. Happy birthday, sweetheart. Hope it's peaceful like you wanted. No reply, but that wasn't unusual. She'd been distant lately, more so since her mom got serious with the new guy. Some radio silence was normal. I spent the evening working late, then microwaved some leftover curry and fell asleep watching a documentary on architecture in Japan. Nothing dramatic. Just another quiet night in a house that used to echo her laughter. The next day, my phone lit up while I was in a meeting. A coworker sent me a message. You see this? Attached was a screenshot from someone's Instagram story. I didn't recognize the username, but the photo was unmistakable. There she was, my daughter, standing in front of a 3-tier cake like something out of a magazine. Gold frosting. Pink accents. The kind of cake you don't order for a small anything. Behind her, the living room I used to call home was filled wall to wall with people. Teenagers. Parents. Neighbors. Everyone. Except me. I told myself it was just a party. Just a misunderstanding. Maybe it was her mother's doing. Maybe she'd been pressured. But then I saw it. The cake topper. 2 figures. A girl and a man in a tuxedo. Stylized, custom-made. The girl was clearly her, right down to the hair color and pose. The man? Tall, dark suit, slight beard. Not me. It wasn't a generic topper. It was him. Her mother's fiancé. And worse than that, it wasn't even subtle. In another photo, they posed together while guests clapped. She leaned her head on his shoulder, eyes closed, smile wide. The caption read, "So proud of our girl." There was no mistake. No miscommunication. I wasn't just excluded. I was replaced. Erased. Not forgotten. Substituted. And it wasn't accidental. That cake topper? That wasn't a last-minute impulse. That was planned. Designed. Someone paid money to craft a version of her birthday where I didn't exist. Where he was the father. Not biologically. Not legally. But in the photos, in the memories, in the story being told, he was the one standing next to her while she blew out the candles. I wasn't even in the room. I didn't text her. I didn't call. What would I even say? Hey, saw your party online. Thanks for the invite. No. I sat in my car that night outside the grocery store, headlights off, gripping the wheel until my knuckles went white. There's a kind of pain that doesn't scream, doesn't cry, just wraps around your spine and settles in. The kind of pain you swallow, not because you're weak, but because you know shouting won't change anything. You ever sit in that kind of silence? Where you can hear your own heartbeat and it sounds like someone else's footsteps walking away. I scrolled through more photos. The more I looked, the more I realized everyone was in on it. Mutual friends, her cousins, even my sister. One of them posted a comment under the cake picture, such a beautiful blended family. Blended. Like I was just another ingredient stirred in too early and forgotten. I checked the timestamps. The party had lasted hours. There were videos, too. In one, her mother stood up and made a toast, thanking the man who stepped up. In the background, I saw my daughter raise her glass to him. laughing, eyes glossy. I couldn't stop watching. I don't even know why. Maybe I was trying to find some moment, some second, where she looked guilty. A flicker of hesitation. Anything. But there was nothing. She looked radiant. Happy. Loved. And I hated that I felt sick seeing her happy in a picture I didn't belong in. That's the kind of thought you don't admit out loud. The kind that makes you question what kind of man, what kind of father you really are. But I promised you the truth. And the truth is, I felt erased. And I didn't know what to do with that. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, trying to rewrite the day in my head. Trying to find some angle that made it make sense. But the story didn't change. She told me, a few friends. She let me help with lights I never saw hung. She let me believe I was still part of something that had already cut me out. There's a different kind of betrayal when it comes not from anger, but from quiet exclusion. No slammed doors. No screamed words. Just not being asked to come. I didn't call her. I didn't text. I didn't ask questions or throw accusations across a phone line that had already gone cold. I just went quiet. There's power in silence, if you know how to use it. Not everyone does. Most people panic when you stop responding, when the expected rhythm breaks. But I've spent 2 decades designing systems to withstand pressure. The key is restraint. Give something just enough flex before it snaps. So I let the silence stretch. I let her fill it, or not. That was her choice. But I was watching. She didn't notice. Or she pretended not to. Days passed. No follow-up message. No. Thanks for the birthday text. No awkward explanation about how the party just kind of happened. Nothing. She went right on posting pictures. Stories of her and her friends at brunch, selfies in the school parking lot, one filtered shot of her with that same man, the fiancé, where the caption just said, "My fave." My breath caught the first time I saw it. It wasn't even about jealousy, it was about narrative. She was rewriting the story of her life, and I wasn't in the chapters anymore. I found myself checking her feed compulsively, like someone picking at a scab. Not to punish myself, but because I needed to see the pattern. Engineers are trained to look for structural weakness. In this silence, it wasn't random. It was intentional, selective, calculated. The way someone prunes a tree to make it grow a certain way. What unnerved me most was how natural she looked in those photos with him. No hesitation, no distance. Like he'd always been there. And me? I'd been photoshopped out. Not just from the party, but from the timeline. There was no trace I'd ever been the one holding her hand on the first day of kindergarten. No memory of the nights I read Charlotte's Web to her when she couldn't sleep. Then I saw the video. Someone had tagged her in it. One of those vertical, shaky ones you don't expect to hit hard until they do. It was during the party. She was mid-laugh, sitting on a chair while people clapped around her. Her mother's fiancé knelt beside her, holding up a small tiara like some kind of father figure coronation. She tilted her head and let him place it gently on her hair. And then, the moment, someone shouted, "You've got the best dad now." She laughed and said, without skipping a beat, "I know, right?" The room clapped. And that was it. That was the second my throat closed. I replayed that clip maybe 50 times. Not because I needed to hear it again, but because I didn't believe it at first. I thought maybe I'd misheard, misinterpreted. But no, it was clear. She said it. She didn't flinch. She didn't joke or correct. She accepted it. Let it become true in front of all those people. And I sat there in my car, parked outside a CVS, watching it like it was security footage from a life I used to be part of. I could have screamed, but I didn't. Instead, I opened my notes app and wrote one sentence. She believes he's the better father now. That night, I did something I hadn't done in years. I pulled out the old hard drive. The one I used to back up everything when she was young. Videos, photos, little voice recordings from when she was 5 or 6. It was dusty, forgotten. But the files were still there. First day of kindergarten. Learning to ride a bike. Trip to the aquarium, just dad plus me. I scrolled through them with a blank face, not smiling, not crying. Just cataloging, like I was gathering evidence. Not to prove something to her, but to prove something to myself. That I hadn't made this up. That I'd really been there. That I'd mattered. I started organizing the files, naming them clearly, grouping them by year. It felt obsessive, maybe even a little pathetic. But it gave me structure. And in the middle of that structure, I started seeing something I hadn't wanted to admit before. The shift hadn't started this month. It had been gradual. The fading. The distance. Her texts got shorter over time. Her visits less enthusiastic. Every time she laughed at a joke her mom's fiancé made in front of me, I told myself it was just teenage moodiness. But it wasn't. It was a transition. A replacement protocol. And I'd been too loyal to the memory of who we used to be to see it happening in real time. The next weekend was technically my custody time. She didn't show up. No call, no explanation. Just a text Sunday night that said, "Sorry I got busy this weekend. Maybe next time?" I stared at that message for a long time. 3 hours, to be exact. I didn't reply. What could I say that wouldn't either beg or accuse? Both were traps. Instead, I opened a blank folder on my desktop. I named it, Just So You Know. I didn't fill it yet, but I knew what it was going to be. Not a plea, not an argument, just the truth. Quiet, unavoidable, patient. By Tuesday, I'd started printing a few of the old photos. Real prints, not digital. I wanted something tangible. I laid them out across my kitchen table like blueprints, moments that still had weight. There was one in particular I kept coming back to. Her asleep on my chest when she was 4, crayon still clutched in her hand. She'd fallen asleep after drawing me a picture of our house, complete with a crooked heart above it. I looked at that image for almost an hour, and I decided something. I wasn't going to fight to be seen. That's what people expect. The big, messy fatherly meltdown. I wasn't interested. I've never been loud, never been theatrical, but I am precise. I remember everything. And now, I was going to use that. Not to scream my place back into her life. No, I was going to make sure that one day, when the dust settled and her memory got quieter, she'd look back and realize the only thing that ever truly held her world together was the man she forgot to invite. I started with the attic. That's where everything old goes when you don't know whether to keep it or burn it. The boxes were still labeled in my handwriting, Hannah first grade. Dad days, crafts. I hadn't touched them in years. Not because I forgot, but because I remembered too well. I always told myself those things were for her, someday, when she got older and wanted to remember. But now I was starting to wonder if she ever would. So I opened the first box. Not to reminisce. To take inventory. Not of her. Of me. The items inside weren't particularly valuable. A paper crown she made me for Father's Day when she was 6. A glitter-glued frame with our photo at the zoo. A popsicle stick house, slightly warped from time. But what hit hardest weren't the objects, it was the handwriting. Her old scrawl on crumpled paper, "You were the best dad a girl could ever have." Spelled exactly like that. I sat there, fingers tracing the edge of the paper, not because I missed her, but because I missed being necessary. That's the part no one warns you about. The way your identity can evaporate quietly, one unreturned text at a time. Downstairs, I'd already started building the digital archive. File by file, I uploaded photos, videos, recordings. Everything dated, everything labeled. Not for her to see now, but for someday. A day she might stumble on it. Or not. Either way, I needed it. Something about the act itself gave me grounding. Structure. And control. I called it Just So You Know. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a plea. It was the most honest thing I could leave behind. Not dramatic. Just evidence. Quiet, irrefutable, enduring evidence of the version of me she was trying to forget. I didn't just include happy moments either. I made sure to add the hard ones. The night she cried after that failed school play audition. The time she called me from her mom's house just to sit in silence because things felt weird over there. The ER visit when she broke her wrist falling off the monkey bars. How I sat beside her for 6 hours, feeding her crackers and singing off-key until she laughed. I had the discharge papers from that day. I scanned those in too. Not because she'd asked for them, but because I needed the receipts, proof I didn't imagine at all. I didn't tell anyone what I was doing. Not my sister, not my therapist, not my ex-wife when she called asking if I'd be okay to switch weekends. I just said yes, calm and level, because the version of me they'd underestimated was exactly the one I needed to keep alive right now. You learn, after enough time, that revenge isn't about rage. It's not about explosions. It's about clarity. It's about knowing exactly what was taken from you and making damn sure you never let them rewrite it like it was never there. That's what this inventory was. My manuscript. My rebuttal. My quiet refusal to disappear. One afternoon, I came across something I'd forgotten entirely. A recording on my old phone, back when she was maybe 10. In it, I'm asking her what she wants to be when she grows up. She says, without hesitation, "I want to build houses like you, but only for people who are sad so they can feel safe again." I asked her why sad people. She said, "Because you're the only person I know who makes sad people feel better just by being there." I listened to that on repeat for a full hour. Not because I needed her to still feel that way, but because I needed to remember that she once did. It's easy to question your sanity in times like this, to wonder if you're overreacting, if you're inventing betrayal because the silence hurts too much. That's why I documented everything. I needed to know that I hadn't hallucinated my own fatherhood, that she didn't just spring into existence at 16 in some blended family fantasy world. I was there. I was everything at one point. And while I had no illusions about being perfect, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I showed up. Every single time. Even when I wasn't wanted. Especially then. By the end of the second week, the folder had over 300 files. I backed it up on 2 separate drives, one cloud-based, one physical. Labeled clearly. Dated. Locked with a password only I knew. I didn't know what I'd do with it yet. Maybe nothing. Maybe everything. But I started to notice something strange as I built it. I wasn't angry anymore. Not in the way people expect. The burn had cooled. What replaced it wasn't apathy. It was intention. Precision. The kind of emotional engineering that only comes after devastation. I didn't want to scream, or beg, or guilt her back. I wanted to outlast the lie. One night, I sat at the kitchen table with all the printed photos spread in front of me. The house was quiet, too quiet. I thought of how she used to sit there, legs swinging off the chair, asking questions about everything I was doing. Why do bridges need tension cables? How do buildings not fall when they're that tall? I used to love those moments. Thought they'd last forever. But they don't tell you that kids leave long before they pack their bags. Sometimes they leave through a birthday party you weren't invited to. And sometimes they leave through a sentence you weren't meant to hear. But here's what they don't expect. That the man left behind might still be watching. Still listening. Still building. Not to win her back. That's not the point. The point is to exist. Fully. Quietly. Inarguably. To leave a footprint so detailed and undeniable that when the memory finally breaks through the noise, when the noise of new love, of curated stories, of replacement fades, there's a trail waiting. A trail that leads not to confrontation, but to truth. And truth, when it waits long enough, always finds a way back to the person who needs it. I sent the package on a Thursday, not on impulse, not in anger, just deliberately. The way you might send a weather report to someone standing outside without knowing it's about to rain. I didn't include a note. No letter. No, thinking of you. Just a small, bound photo book in plain wrapping, delivered to her mother's house. Black cover. No title. Inside 20 images. 20 memories. No captions, no embellishments, no explanations. Just pictures only I could have taken. Moments no one else was there for. A silent map back to the version of her life where I still existed. I chose each photo carefully. The one where she's painting in the garage in a shirt 5 sizes too big, a smear of blue across her cheek. The one of her asleep in the back seat with a stuffed giraffe in her lap, sunlight bending around her face. The one of us holding hands on a hiking trail, our shadows long across the rocks. These weren't posed. They weren't performative. They were quiet moments, glimpses of a life before she decided someone else could be the stand-in. I wasn't trying to make her feel bad. I just wanted her to remember. She didn't respond. Not that day. Not the next. I didn't expect her to. What I was doing wasn't about reaction. It was about disruption. Just enough to throw the new story off course. To complicate the revision. Because here's the thing. You can replace her role, but you can't replace history. You can silence someone in your life, but memory isn't obedient. It leaks through. It returns in dreams, in smells, in objects you thought you threw away. And this photo book? This was a leak. a fracture in the dam of her new version of events. The next day, her mother's fiancé emailed me. A 2-paragraph message disguised as diplomacy. "Hi, Alan. I hope this finds you well. Hannah received your package. We'd appreciate it if you could coordinate any future communications through her mom or myself to avoid confusion or emotional disruption. We're trying to maintain a peaceful environment." I read it 3 times, not because I was shocked, but because it was so predictable. That phrase, emotional disruption, it's what people use when they want you to disappear quietly, when they want to rewrite without confrontation. I didn't reply. Silence was still my sharpest weapon. That weekend, I showed up. Not to their house. I'd never do that. I went to her school event. Public. Civil. No scene. I'd seen the flyer weeks ago, her art showcase. She hadn't invited me, of course, but she hadn't explicitly uninvited me either. And the way I saw it, absence hadn't earned me exile. I arrived early, parked far from the main lot, stood in the back corner of the gallery with my hands in my pockets. No camera, no clipboard, just eyes, watching, waiting. And when she walked in, I saw her face change the moment she spotted me. She didn't smile. She didn't wave. Her expression barely moved, but her body did. Her shoulders stiffened. Her hand, resting casually on her new dad's arm, pulled away. She looked at me like I was a ghost, but not one she feared, one she recognized. That's the difference. Ghosts don't scare you unless they were real ones. She didn't come over. She didn't speak, but she looked. 3 times, in fact. Once when I first arrived, once as she showed a friend her sculpture, and once just before she left. That last look lasted longer than the others, long enough for guilt to register. The piece she'd submitted, a metal and clay sculpture, was titled Tension. It was abstract. 2 distorted shapes leaning away from each other, connected by a single twisted thread. Most people complimented the craftsmanship. I stood in front of it for 5 minutes, unmoving. You ever look at something and feel like it's bleeding your own thoughts? That's what it felt like. I didn't take a photo. I didn't need to. Some images stay burned into you because they're made from your absence. And that sculpture, it wasn't just art. It was confession. Maybe not to me. Maybe not yet. But to herself. When the event ended, I left first. No words. No confrontation. Just enough presence to remind her I hadn't vanished. That I could still be there if I chose to be. That visibility is power, especially when they've already started telling everyone you're not part of the story anymore. And I think that unsettled her more than anything. The calm, the restraint, the refusal to beg. People expect wounded fathers to chase, to plead, to make scenes. But I wasn't trying to get her back. I was trying to give her something heavier, the truth of who I had been. Later that night, I checked her Instagram. No new posts. No stories. She hadn't gone dark in months. The photo book worked. Not as guilt. As interruption. That's all I wanted. For the timeline to crack. For her to pause before uploading another filtered photo with him, wondering, what if he sees this? What if he remembers it differently? Because I will. I remember everything. That's what no one counted on. That the man they erased might have receipts. Might still be building. Might still be watching, not from bitterness, but from the kind of memory that refuses to rot. When I got home, I opened the Just So You Know folder again. It had grown, now including a scan of the sculpture brochure, timestamped photos from the event, and a screenshot of her profile before she stopped posting. Documentation. Not for revenge. For record. Because one day, whether it's 5 months or 15 years, she's going to need to know. Not guess. Not wonder. No. Who was there? Who showed up? Who stayed silent without surrendering? That's the difference. That's the line I was drawing. And now she'd seen it. She called me 2 nights later. I let it ring twice before answering. Not to be cruel. Just enough delay to make her wonder if I would. That pause. That wait. Sometimes it's more powerful than anything you could say. I answered with her name. Just her name. Not hello. Not what's up. Not finally. Just Hannah. It landed soft, but it made her inhale like she'd been holding her breath too long. For a second, neither of us spoke. And in that second, I realized how quiet her voice had become in my life, and how loud her silence had been. You didn't have to do that, she said finally. I could hear her pacing. She always paced when she was nervous, even as a kid. I imagined her walking small laps in her bedroom, hoodie sleeves pulled over her hands like she used to when she was 12. She didn't say, "Dad." Not once. Just you. Like I was a role she'd stepped away from and wasn't sure how to name anymore. I let the silence hang. Let her sit in it. Because sometimes the most honest thing you can do is not fill the gap someone else created. Do what? I asked, calm, not sarcastic. Just level. You know what? The photos. The event. You mean the art showcase? You know that's not what I mean, she snapped. But it wasn't real anger. It was panic in a different costume. You're trying to make it weird. Like you're trying to guilt me. I exhaled once through my nose. Not a laugh. Not a sigh. Just breath. No, Hannah. I'm not trying to guilt you. Then what are you trying to do? Be remembered, I said. That's all. That stopped her. I heard it. That brief, fragile break where the sentence you expected isn't the one that shows up. It's like tripping on an invisible stair. I haven't forgotten you, she said, almost too quickly. But quick isn't proof. Quick is defense. Then tell me, I said, still calm. Who was there for your first surgery? She didn't answer. Just that one, I said. Tell me who sat in the recovery room for 8 hours when you were scared. You don't have to apologize. Just tell me. She went silent again. I let her. You ever hear someone's guilt through the way they breathe? Not loud, but uneven. Small, swallowed inhales like they're trying not to feel too much all at once. That's what filled the line. No crying. Just the sound of someone realizing a narrative they built doesn't hold up under pressure. I was just trying to, I don't know, make things simple, she said finally. Her voice had dropped. Lower. Honest. It's complicated with Mom. And Mike's been really good to me. He shows up. He supports me. I'm not competing, I cut in gently. She stopped. I'm not, I said again softer. I'm just not disappearing. That distinction hung between us like a wire strung too tight. She didn't argue. She didn't say my name. But I heard her breathe like she was trying to remember how to feel things she'd packed away. There's something brutal about not being hated. Hate is contact. Energy. What I'd been erased with wasn't hate. It was convenience. Clean storytelling. Easier lines to draw. And now I was breaking those lines, not by yelling, but by staying still where they tried to draw around me. That's what people don't expect. They don't know how to handle what won't vanish on cue. I didn't mean to hurt you, she said after a long pause. I know, I replied. That's what made it hurt worse. She didn't respond to that. She couldn't. Some truths aren't meant to be answered. Just carried. I didn't press. Didn't twist the knife. I just let the stillness breathe. Let her feel it. She mumbled something after that. Maybe, okay, maybe nothing at all, and hung up. No goodbye. No closure. But I didn't need one. That call wasn't for fixing. It was for witnessing. She'd seen me. Heard me. Not through someone else's version. Mine. That's all I'd wanted. The next morning, I took the final step. I went into my workroom, the one she used to call the quiet cave, and pulled out a frame I'd been saving. Custom-made. Matte black. No glass. Softwood edges. I placed a single photo inside. Me tying her shoelaces on the front porch when she was 6. The sun is hitting her hair just right. She's laughing at something I'd said. I don't remember the joke. Doesn't matter. What matters is I was there. And the joy on her face was ours. I wrapped it carefully and left it with her grandmother. No note. Just the frame. I didn't wait for her to say anything. I wasn't looking for a performance. I just knew that photo would sit somewhere in her room, or her closet, or maybe even her trash can for now. But someday when the newness of her curated life thins, when her memory starts chasing roots, she'll find it again. And she'll know. Not guess. Not reconstruct. She'll know that there was a man who didn't shout, didn't beg, didn't vanish. Just quietly stood where he always was. And refused to be replaced. I didn't hear from her after that call. Not for weeks. I didn't expect to. Grief doesn't text back. Guilt doesn't schedule check-ins. And the kind of silence that follows recognition, the real kind, isn't empty. It's full of the things you finally see when the noise dies down. So I didn't follow up. I didn't check her socials. I stopped logging into the folder. Not because I gave up, but because I didn't need to prove anything anymore. I'd already done the most dangerous thing you can do when someone tries to erase you. I remained. Graduation crept closer. She hadn't told me the date, but I found it anyway, quietly. I wasn't planning to attend. Not because I wasn't proud. Because I understood something now. I was no longer the man who needed to be seen. I was the one who had seen her completely. And when you reach that place, your love stops begging for access. It just waits. I marked the date anyway, not on the calendar. In my mind, the same way I used to mark her height on the pantry wall with pencil lines and dates. Quiet, but permanent. Then one night, just after midnight, I got the notification. Not a message. A tag. She'd updated her profile picture. I don't know why I clicked. Maybe habit. Maybe hope. But when it opened, the breath left my chest so slowly it hurt. It was the photo. The one from the frame. The porch. The shoelaces. Me kneeling. Her laughing. She'd cropped it just enough to keep it from looking staged, but the framing was unmistakable. No caption. No emoji. Just that. Like she was returning a piece of something she didn't know how to carry, but wasn't ready to throw away either. I didn't screenshot it. Didn't save it. That wasn't the point. The point was what it meant. I'm not gone. Maybe not forgiven. Maybe not even fully welcome. But no longer deleted. No longer a ghost. The photo stayed up for 4 days. Then she changed it again. Something of her and her friends at a beach. Life moved on. But for 4 days, the memory was public. And that was enough. That was her whisper. Her way of saying, I remember. And maybe even, I'm sorry. Quietly. Like me. I never did get an invitation to graduation. I watched the live stream from my laptop. She looked beautiful. Confident. Her name was called, and she walked the stage like someone who believed she belonged there. And I felt something strange, not bitterness. Not pride, even. But relief. Because that was still my girl. Not in title, but in foundation. You don't have to wear the jersey to know you played for the team. Some things are built too deep to dismantle. That same week, I walked into her grandmother's house to drop off a few old books. I hadn't been inside in over a year. The guest room was being redecorated. New paint, new shelves. And above the desk, hanging just slightly off-center, was the frame. The photo. Still inside. Not in her room. Not on her wall. But not in the trash. On the wall of a place she visited. A quiet decision. A compromise between forgetting and remembering. And that, more than anything, told me she wasn't erasing anymore. She was rearranging. I stood there longer than I should have, just staring at that image. Not because I needed to, but because I could. Without pain. Without ache. Just understanding. That the version of me she'd pushed out wasn't dead. It had just been waiting. And now it was back on the wall. Maybe crooked. Maybe weathered. But there. Seen. Framed. I drove home in silence. No music. No calls. Just the hum of tires on pavement and the slow exhale of a man who had nothing left to prove. That night, I opened the Just So You Know folder one last time. I didn't add to it. I didn't delete it either. I just renamed it, for when you're ready. Then I closed it. Not because the story was over, but because I no longer needed to hold onto it so tightly. Letting go doesn't always mean releasing. Sometimes it means holding something differently. Softer. Without fear. And I guess that's where this ends. Not with a hug. Not with a reunion. But with a shift. A realignment. A quiet frame on a wall in a house I don't live in anymore. But my echo does. My care does. My history does. And sometimes, that's enough. If you've ever been replaced in someone's life without warning, cut out of a story you helped build, then you understand what this was really about. This channel is for people who don't make scenes, but don't disappear either. If that speaks to you, subscribe. I tell one story like this every day. No noise. Just truth. See you soon in the next story.